Hello and welcome to the Irish NFL Show, live from Arizona, live from Glendale, Arizona, the home of Super Bowl 57. You can see over my shoulder the State Farm Stadium. We are here. We are very close. We are just over 24 hours away from the kickoff of the big game of the year. The Kansas City Chiefs, the AFC champions, going up against the NFC champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm here with Colum Cronin. Colum, you're very welcome to the show.
Yeah, delighted to be here, Brian. It's great to be back. Difficult to believe that it's almost a year since we were in down in LA. Sun is shining again. Got the SPF 50 on and putting it on like emulsion paint to ensure that we don't get sunburned. But brilliant setting. You have to say the past week the build-up has been amazing. I don't know how the Arizona and the city of Phoenix do it. They're hosting not only a Super Bowl, but a major golf tournament, and everything has run really, really smoothly.
This is the 57th episode of the Irish NFL Show this season. 14 preseason shows, 36 regular season shows, 6 playoff shows, and the 57th show, Super Bowl 57. I'd like to thank our partners, Cassidy Travel, who kind of put it together in terms of sending us out here to do the show. So we really appreciate all the support throughout the course of the season. Colum, this week, you touched on it there. We were in Radio Row for large parts of the week. Obviously, you're here since Monday. I came on Wednesday. And we were in LA last year, and we thought that was big. It was enormous in the sense of what we saw on Radio Row with the Rams and the Bengals. But having experienced this year, it's quite a different feel to it.
Yeah, it was massive this year. I mean, I think it was probably 4 times the size of what it was last year. I think that is down to changing of the COVID protocols, obviously, but also the fact the sheer number of players and others who are now doing podcasts. I mean, you saw Pat McAfee doing his show. Obviously, Kay Adams was doing her show. So there was more of the setup down there this year, more tables, more people around. And over the course of the week, obviously, we saw different people come through. I don't think anyone we saw had as big an entourage as Russ came through with last year. But Stephen A. might have been up there. It was great. It was the opportunity to get to meet a lot of people. We have some interviews coming up in this show of people that we caught up with down on Radio Row. And obviously got to see a lot of the people we've had on the show over the past 3 years or thereabouts.
Yeah, Colin mentioned interviews. We were fortunate to catch up with Mina Kimes from ESPN, Jordan Schultz inside the NFL for The Score. We also had Steve Levy from ESPN, who's going to be commentating on the game for the public in Australia and New Zealand. Really good to catch up with them. You touched on Russell Wilson last year in the entourage, and we were fortunate this week because with the amount of people there's a lot of NFL players there, both ex-players and existing players, and we got an opportunity to catch up with quite a few.
Yeah, lots of legends of the game, obviously. Saw people who just been inducted into the Hall of Fame. Obviously, saw plenty of current players as well. Talked about it a little bit on our podcast. Got to meet Emmanuel Sanders. Got to meet my personal hero, Shannon Sharp. Got to meet Patrick Surtain. And obviously Jake the Snake. Probably makes more sense that he was an ASU grad, so that he was here. But yeah, just a really brilliant week.
I've never seen you move so quickly when you saw Shannon Sharp. The opportunity to get a photograph of him was too much for him.
Yeah, well, look, I grew up watching the Broncos in the late 80s into the 90s. I think Shannon helped revolutionize the tight end position. A big fan of what he's done since, obviously. So great to get the opportunity, shake his hand, get a photo, and tell him like he has a big fan base across the Atlantic.
We caught up with so many people this week, and I felt the overarching piece was nobody's really sure who's going to win this game. I know last year's game, there was a great story around the fact that the Bengals came hot in the playoffs, got to the Super Bowl, and the pressure was on the Rams because Sean McVay had lost them. There were so many mixed opinions yesterday and on Thursday in terms of who will win this game tomorrow. Ultimately, will it be the Eagles and Jalen Hurts, or will it be the case of Mahomes? And then we had this kind of narrative around, is a dynasty potentially on the cards? This is their third Super Bowl in 4 years. Andy Reid maybe slightly under pressure to kind of win his second Super Bowl. If he was to lose tomorrow, that's one win in 4. But again, it was so many different mixed opinions. So many people picking the Eagles, so many people picking the Chiefs. It was hard to gauge overall who should be the favorite.
Yeah, it kind of takes me back, I suppose, a little bit to, so some of the Super Bowls we've had, because like they're very often a coin toss game, right? Because it is often the two best teams. I think that's what we have this year. This year in particular, it seems to be the best team versus the best quarterback. I think it's a testament to the job that Howie and the Eagles have done, that they're facing against Patrick Mahomes, and many people are saying they can win it. It tells you just how strong that roster is. The other piece is obviously the QB injuries. That is a piece that a lot of people are focusing on, because how fit is Patrick Mahomes? How fit is Jalen Hurts? Will they truly be at 100%? I've no doubt defenses are going to look to test that ankle, test that shoulder very early on tomorrow night.
Yeah, we have Matt Derrick coming on shortly from the Chiefs Digest, and we were talking to him briefly yesterday around Patrick Mahomes and this high ankle sprain and what's deemed to be a high ankle sprain in the NFL anymore, bearing in mind how well he played in the championship game against the Bengals. But he kind of pushed back slightly, and he'll probably get into it more so when he comes on the show. Is everybody's talking about Mahomes' injury, because Hurts has played the 2 games in the playoffs since the shoulder injury, that there's been very little talk, and he feels that injury is still lagging there. He caught up with a couple of Eagles beat writers, and he feels that injury hasn't gone away. It's just a case of they had 2 reasonably comfortable wins because of the circumstances with the 49ers in the championship game, and obviously the Giants not at the same level as the Eagles, that he hasn't really been truly tested. And I'd be interested to see tomorrow against a Chiefs defense this year that's kind of floating under the radar, kind of didn't start the season great, came strong towards the back end of the season.
Yeah, I think certainly if you're a Chiefs fan, that you're going to look and you're going to say that the Eagles haven't been tested, right? Because the Giants, the Achilles heel of the Giants this year was you could run all over them. And my goodness, can the Eagles run all over you if you allow them to? And with Brock Purdy's injury. But, given what the Eagles have done throughout the season, they've been impressive and they can attack you in different ways. They aren't going to want to throw the ball too much tomorrow anyway. You're going to want to keep the ball. You want to keep it on the ground, keep it away from Patrick Mahomes, run that clock down. Why are you going to want to throw it too much? But I can see certainly as a Chiefs fan, a Chiefs beat writer, why they are focusing on the fact that Jalen Hurts, might be carrying a little bit more of an injury than the Eagles are letting people know.
Another storyline during the week was the illness of some of the Chiefs players, and it was floating around that 1 or 2 had picked up kind of a bug, and that's again has been played down. It's something that's they don't believe is an issue, and they're 100% to go tomorrow. Very interesting on Thursday, that both sides declared every player available. Like throughout the course of the season, you have the injury report come out, and by Thursday there's still 1 or 2 players that are questionable going into the game. Both teams a clear bill of health, full strength, no excuses for either side. Whoever doesn't win tomorrow to be turning around and say, if only we had certain players available on the day.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. But again, like we're going to talk about this. You never know. I mean, who would have thought? Take the Broncos against the Seahawks. All the talk coming up to that Super Bowl. Broncos offense, so impressive. Record setting. They can do anything. The Seahawks, sure, their defense is good, but they haven't faced an offense as good as the Broncos. It starts the very first play, the ball goes over Peyton Manning's head. Everything changed. That's the beauty of this game. You never really know what could happen. We could see something on kickoff tomorrow that could totally change the course of the game.
It took 8 minutes before we got into the Broncos talk on Super Bowl Saturday. Only joke. But yeah, you're right. Like, you can't legislate for different situations in the game. How games started. We saw the Chiefs against the Bucs a couple of years ago, and Mahomes went into that game and people felt he was injured. But Mahomes in that particular game wasn't the problem. Essentially, the offensive line was so injury prone at that stage of the season. They couldn't protect him, and the Bucs won that game. You can't legislate for a potential injury in the game tomorrow either. That could come where a player is in early but immediately has to come out for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, look, say take the game where Mahomes had to go out and Chad Henne had to come in. I mean, injuries can change everything, but we're talking about 2 serious teams. The coaching staffs are what's interesting in terms of, you got Andy Reid, who's in his 24th season, Nick Sirianni's in his 2nd. How will that play out? Does that put a little bit more pressure on Andy because he needs to win one? Whereas for Nick Sirianni, it's kind of a gimme. But equally, if you don't win it this time, how many more opportunities will you get to come back? There are so many intriguing storylines. We're 10 minutes in? We haven't even mentioned the Kelsey brothers.
Well, I wasn't going to come to the Kelsey brothers just yet. I was actually going to come to, you touched on Sirianni there, and other teams around the league are essentially doing his team talk before the game, because there's no extra motivation for them tomorrow to go and win the Super Bowl. But yet the 49ers players have been chipping away, kind of dethroning the Eagles that they shouldn't really be here. They shouldn't be the number 1 seed. We've had the Cowboys come out. Julian Love for the Giants last week on Good Morning Football made a comment around anybody could come in and manage this team because they're so good, they've so much talent. Like, they don't need any extra motivation. And you touched on your time when you were in Philly growing up, and it's the city doesn't need any extra reasons to go and win this game tomorrow.
Well, it's a city that loves people to doubt them. It loves to be the underdog. It loves people to say, you can't do this. And my goodness, if you're Nick Sirianni and the Eagles, you are delighted. I mean, it'll be interesting to talk to Matt to see what he thinks. I mean, Andy Reid has got to be thinking, would the 49ers just shut up? Because, yeah, so according to the 49ers, Jalen Hurts isn't a QB, and according to the Giants, Nick Sirianni isn't a head coach. So apparently this team, the Eagles, are in the Super Bowl without a head coach and without a QB. I mean, that is bulletin board material right there. Yeah, Philly are going to love the fact that people are doubting them, especially the fact that the Cowboys have been chirping. So their divisional rivals have been having a go, and the team that they beat in the championship game have been having a go. That's just going to add, I think, to the motivation. We saw it with Jason Kelce. When Jason Kelce won the Super Bowl the last time, you saw him get on the mic, you saw him talk about how people doubted him, how people told him he was too small, how he couldn't play center. So Philly absolutely thrives off this, but so does Patrick Mahomes.
Absolutely. It's making for such an intriguing story, and there's so many storylines going into this game, and we haven't even touched on the fact, like, for all the, as you said, the noise coming from other teams around the Eagles been here. It's the first time since the 2017 season in which the two number one seeds have come together. But essentially, you kind of said it's the best quarterback against the best team, but the AFC at the start of the season, a lot of people were very strong on the Bills, and the Bills got to the playoffs, and obviously there was the circumstance in Cincinnati which kind of derailed their season essentially, because I'm not sure medically when it got to the stage of the season, I think their heads had gone to a certain extent, and the Bengals went in and put a beat down on them. And then when the Bengals did that, everybody felt that the Bengals would potentially go and beat the Chiefs again. It was Burrowhead, and the Bengals had beaten the Chiefs 3 times in a row. They got over the hump there, essentially confirmed that they are the best team from the AFC coming into this game.
Yeah, I mean, I've no doubt the Bengals, they haven't said it, but they could point to things. The 49ers are pointing to the injuries. The Bengals could say, well, we were missing some of our O-line guys. We had a young guy who made a really terrible error in terms of giving away that penalty. So there are things that they can point to. Look, you need a bit of luck to get this far into the season. You need a bit of luck to go your way, but it also helps when you have Patrick Mahomes, when you have Andy Reid. I'm looking forward to getting to talk to Matt in a little while about the fact that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are so good at the scripted start, right? And they will test that Eagles defense. So there are so many intriguing storylines to this particular Super Bowl.
The stability that these two teams have from the ownership and the GM, this is a large part as to why they're here, because when the Eagles won the last Super Bowl, essentially then how you had to rip it up to a large extent, and they kind of rebuilt the team. And when Jalen Hurts got traded in the second round, they had the Carson Wentz situation, and they moved on from him, gave him his opportunity. And even at an early stage of his time in Philadelphia, people felt he was like the holding quarterback essentially to when they drafted the next quarterback. He's proven everybody wrong. He's proven myself wrong. I kind of joked at the start of the season when you picked the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl. So congratulations on that front. But again, on the Chiefs side, like, they traded away Tyreek Hill. I remember the day in which that deal went down. We were doing an interview with Jack Johnson, who went from the Patriots to the Raiders. He was surprised by that move. Everybody felt that Andy Reid needed to kind of go in a different direction offensively and kind of bring a collaborative approach. And they went kind of strong in free agency, bringing in other players. And yet, the both teams are here. Like, it's you can't kind of legislate for the ownership and GM. And given head coaches, albeit Andy Reid is such a great head coach, but given Sirianni the time, because you think back to week 4 or 5 last season, and people were questioning whether he was the right guy at that stage because they didn't have the best start. He kind of cut off on off-season training camps and stuff, kind of trying to keep the players fresh for the second part of the season. And yet, within 18 months, they're here and they're in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a testament to both the leaderships that you've seen. You're talking about the owner, you're talking about the GM, you're talking about the head coach. There's also, like, Sean Payton talked about that, right? And he talked about it before he took the Broncos job. He talked about it yesterday with Pat McAfee. That triangle between the owner, the GM, and the head coach is so important. And the trust that the owner put in Howie in order to change things and to get it right. And obviously the Chiefs have had the stability, but the fact that Veach constantly is able to find ways in the cap to make it work. I mean, you go back, we're probably 2 years on from the Chiefs at one point at $147 to play with in cap space. yet they made it work, and every single year they're competitive. That's a testament to ownership, that's a testament to GM, and that's a testament to the head coaches. What you're saying about Sirianni is probably talks to a little bit about the kind of 24-hour news media that we have now. He was 4 or 5 games into his tenure and people are already kind of doubting him. People want immediate results, and sometimes it can take a little bit of time to find your feet. At the end of his second season, he's in a Super Bowl. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but because social media wants instantaneous results, that's where we find ourselves.
Well, it probably didn't help at the time that the Cowboys were strong. We spoke to Jeff Reinbold during the week, and he spoke with Jerry Jones, and how Jerry will be bullying about the fact that the Eagles are in the Super Bowl, and he'll want immediate results. The Eagles fans, like most teams in the NFC East, are restless fans. They want to be here competing in the Super Bowl. And we are going to talk Chiefs more so, when we come back into the show, offensively and defensively. We'll have Matt Derrick on from the Chiefs Digest, but we're going to kick off with our first interview from yesterday. Colum had a great opportunity to speak to Mina Kimes. Mina Kimes came on the show during the COVID period remotely. It was great to catch up with her yesterday. Here's a great few minutes.
Back to the Irish NFL show, we have a very special guest. This person was kind enough to join us about a year ago virtually, whilst we were still in the midst of COVID, and today we get to talk to her on Radio Row. From ESPN, Mina Kimes, how are you doing?
I'm good, so good to see you guys in person.
Well, firstly and most importantly, where is Lenny? Who's looking after Lenny? Is Lenny okay?
Lenny is fine. I cannot believe the number of people who have asked me, why is he not here? He's a diva. It takes a lot to get him to leave the house, so he's back at my home in Los Angeles, but he appreciates you asking.
Well, I had to leave my dog in Dublin, so, I get it. I understand. Look, we're obviously, everything's focused on Sunday, but if we go back, you were very impressed with Nick Sirianni back on the very first weekend of the year. I think you tweeted back then that you admired his aggressiveness. I would say that, I don't know if I've ever seen a coach so embody their city's culture, and I say that somebody who loves Philly. But what are your thoughts on Sirianni? And this is Guy's second season. A lot of questions last year. I remember gave up play calling, rolled into Denver. Vic Fangio kind of dared them to beat him with Jalen Hurts' arm. They did it, and they've never really looked back since then.
Yeah, so I actually tweeted at the beginning of his tenure in Philadelphia from week 1 in September 2021, because right out the gate, he was aggressive on fourth downs, which is, that's the identity of the Eagles. Has been that way since last time they were in the Super Bowl with Doug Peterson. It's a very analytically run franchise, but you never know if the new head coach is going to embrace that. And I was very impressed by it. I remain impressed by it. He did a ton this season. He's very aggressive. They were very successful doing so. I think that's very important in this game in particular. And as you said, I really think when the Eagles made that change on offense and then really leaned in to Jalen Hurts' talent as a runner, you really saw that offense take off in terms of their efficiency on that side of the ball. Then this year, of course, the addition of A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts' evolution as a passer has been really impressive too. And you have to, I think, lay some of that at the feet of Nick Sirianni. He's been a terrific head coach in terms of the way this team is run on both sides of the ball, the decisions he makes both in games when it comes to things like fourth downs and general game management, and then how well this roster is playing.
Mm-hmm. And we saw Sean Payton kind of earlier on today and over the past week, I guess, when he was pitching about what was important to him. He talked about ownership, general manager and head coach, and that triangle being really important. And when you look at the Eagles, you got Jeffrey Lurie, you got Howie, and now you got Sirianni. How impressed, or should we be impressed, or do we underestimate Jeffrey Lurie's willingness to give Howie the time after the wheels came off, but to fix things?
Yeah, I think you have to put some of it on the owner, because the Eagles have been very aggressive, not just in fourth downs, although you'd be surprised how much of that does trickle up to another, whether they're tolerant of that kind of risk-taking generally, but also some of the moves they've made in really rebuilding a roster in record time with this administration. Jerry Jones today, I think, had a comment where he said the Eagles, they went all in on this year. It's not really true. They did something kind of interesting, which is they acquired a lot of draft picks over the last couple of years, and spent time trying to build a young core, but then at the same time they also made aggressive moves in free agency, in the draft, and all of them seem to have paid off. So Roseman's been fantastic. It's the reason why most people view him as the best executive in the NFL this year. And I think that the job that the three people you have mentioned have done to get the Eagles to this point, it can't be ignored.
And on that team building piece, and when you consider like the 70 sacks and the fact that you have 4 guys in double digits, but they might not be, I'm wondering, like the fact their approach, they might not be the 4 best guys on paper, right? But when you look at the 8, they're probably the 8th best. Is that something that, like, given it's a copycat league, are more teams going to look at it and recognize the importance of depth now?
You know, it's funny because the last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they also had a really deep pass rush, so clearly there's something there. I think it would be a nice thing to aspire to, but it's one thing to say, well, we want a Son Reddick, a Javon Hargrave, a Brandon Graham, a Josh Sweat, a Fletcher. You know, it is an area though where they have invested a lot, free agency and the draft, and it has paid off. I would say this. That high sack rate, and the Eagles have the highest sack rate in the NFL by a large margin. A lot of it is the depth of the pass rush, the fact that you can't really double team any of these guys because they can punish you elsewhere. But a lot of it is also because they're so good in coverage. This is a defense that is deep from front to back. A lot of those sacks are coverage sacks, you know. And I think in terms of like the way this roster is built, there are things you can point to and say, I'd like that, but they've just really found a lot of really good players.
And then I suppose on the other side with the Eagles, or with the Chiefs, we were talking to Matt Derrick, who's a beat writer for the Chiefs, and he was saying that, like, when it comes to that ownership piece, that they probably would, if you went back to ask them, they would probably acknowledge that when the new owner came in or took over from his dad, like, that first 5 years was a bit learning, right? There were probably mistakes, there were things he'd like to take back. He has learned, you know, and they, if you look at Beach and what Andy Reid is doing, but they have taken a slightly different approach in some respects, and they're obviously building. But I'm thinking of the fact that, you know, in terms of rookies, they have had the most rookies played this year. Is that going to be, with Andy Reid being 24 years on the sidelines, how much of a factor is the rookies on the field going to play on Sunday?
It's huge. I mean, I think they've started the most defensive rookies in the AFC Championship of any team.
They probably would, if you went back to ask them, they would probably acknowledge that when the new owner came in or took over from his dad, like, that first 5 years was a bit learning, right? There were probably mistakes, there were things he'd like to take back. He has learned, you know, and they, if you look at Beach and what Andy Reid is doing, but they have taken a slightly different approach in some respects, and they're obviously building. But I'm thinking of the fact that, you know, in terms of rookies, they have had the most rookies played this year. Is that going to be, with Andy Reid being 24 years on the sidelines, how much of a factor is the rookies on the field going to play on Sunday?
It's huge. I mean, I think they've started the most defensive rookies in the AFC Championship of any team in like years. I know that. And the fact that they were so successful, I think, you know, some of that has to do with the experience they have up front, obviously Chris Jones, but a lot of it also has to do with Steve Spagnuolo and calling this defense, which I think has been so impressive despite its youth. This is a roster that was supposed to be, I wouldn't say rebuilding necessarily, but when they traded Tyreek Hill for draft picks, kind of resetting their window, which is something you can do when you have Patrick Mahomes and he's only 27 and you want this team to be good for a long time. But not only did they reset their window, so to speak, they hit on a lot of those picks. Players like George Karlaftis up front, Trent McDuffie in the slot, young cornerbacks who, you know, you really saw grow over the course of the year. Joshua Williams, of course, Isaiah Pacheco on offense, all have been contributors, all who play meaningful roles in the Super Bowl. Now, as to your question, will it cause some problems? I think, you know, where I would see it potentially being an issue is if there's the need, particularly defensively, for in-game adjustments. That's where you sort of run into trouble saying, oh, you know, what we prepared for isn't quite working. We'd like to, you know, make this sort of defensive adjustments in terms of coverages and whatnot on halftime. That's where I think it can get a little bit tricky having such a young secondary.
And I talked to you about, I suppose, the Eagles and will what they're doing impact. I'm wondering, one of the moves we saw the Chiefs made this off-season was Brendan Daly, who had been so successful with the Patriots and then came across to the Chiefs, was really successful D-line coach, and then decided he wanted to make a change. He wanted a new challenge. He goes to Andy Reid and he says, Andy, I want to coach linebackers. And they've made that change. We've seen playoff Frank, we've seen Chris Jones, one of the most dominant in the league. I mean, might we see more? Because up to this point, it has felt like for a lot of coaches, once you're almost in situ, or you're at least successful in a certain role, you rarely change. You might change coming up the line, but once you're there, is this something that, are we going to see more creativity in the NFL, more creativity with coaching?
I don't know. I think there are a lot of examples throughout NFL history of different coaches taking on new responsibilities and seeing different position groups improve as a result. But you're right that it's not the norm. Typically, you don't see these kind of changes, certainly not during the season. But to me, it really just goes up to the head coach, whether they're willing to kind of self-scout and evaluate in the way that you said, Nick Sirianni giving up play calling. It's probably one of the hallmarks of a good coach, is that sort of flexibility and sort of willingness to think outside the box a little bit. The
kind of ability to delegate and be willing to and be comfortable enough to delegate, I suppose. And in terms then of, if the Chiefs were to win on Sunday, for them, do we really begin to start discussing them as a dynasty, or are we so desperate to have that conversation because of what Brady and Belichick and the Patriots did? Do they break everyone's brains, and we really want a replacement for that?
I don't think it's because of the Patriots so much as because of Patrick Mahomes. Because when we watch him, it's so obvious that he's one of the, and if not the best to ever do it. So we want him to be in the, not we want, I don't know if everybody wants, but there is that, I think, question. Okay, he's maybe the most talented quarterback I've ever seen in my life. I'm willing to admit that. At what point can we start talking about him in the same breath as Brady? And that's where I think it gets to, well, when he's won multiple Super Bowls, and he's now already won multiple MVPs. And I think that's sort of getting to this, like when we look at this Chiefs and we say, okay, like in this 5-year run, it's their third time in the Super Bowl. Well, it feels like if he wins this one, we can actually start having that legitimate conversation, even though it's significantly less Super Bowls than Tom Brady won.
Is there maybe an underrated story going into this that obviously, look, everyone's focused on the Kelce's and everyone's focused on Andy Reid? Is there something that maybe, we're a position battle that we're not discussing that is intriguing?
I love a good position battle. I think for me that Chiefs' young secondary is obviously going to be very important in this game. But really, I thought, I just rewatched the AFC Championship. I was so impressed by their defense and how they played, at all three levels. But they've also improved a lot as the season went on. When I was kind of gathering stats for this matchup and looking at where teams might have advantages, I realized pretty quickly that the Chiefs' defense, their statistical performance, however you want to look at it, over the course of the season was largely irrelevant, because when you cut it in half, they were such a different defense from week 10, week 12 on. They improved so much as the year went on in terms of getting pressure without blitzing, tackling, which I think you really saw in the championship game, just playing sound coverage. And, the prevailing storyline this week is we got the best quarterback and the best team, and I think that is true. But this Chiefs team shouldn't be underestimated. They're not full of scrubs.
Mina Collins, I want to thank you for your time. As I mentioned before we began recording, you have a big fan base in Ireland. I want to shout out Joanna Reardon. You should definitely make a trip over to the Little Green Island at some point, but I want to thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Back into the Irish NFL show from Glendale, Arizona. As you can see over the shoulder, the home of Super Bowl 57, where tomorrow the Philadelphia Eagles will go off against the Kansas City Chiefs to see who comes out on top and be the Super Bowl champions for this season. Delighted to have Matt Derrick from the Chiefs Digest join us. Matt, you've been on the show numerous times over the course of the last 3 years discussing Chiefs, good times, bad times. So it's great to have you here with us today.
It is great, and we've been saying for years that as soon as the Chiefs get back into the Super Bowl, we're going to get together. We pulled it off, so it's fantastic to be here with you guys.
Such an interesting week. You've been with the players. You're staying close by. You've been at all the press conferences throughout the course of the week. The players, the head coach. Is there a sense, a relaxation about this team that all the noise, it's gone now. It's let's go win this game tomorrow.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, this is a calm and confident group that they've got. And I think a lot of it comes from, obviously, the experience of the veterans who've been there before and can tell the young guys and the newcomers, what it's like, what it's going to be experienced. The rookies, there's so many rookies on this team. They got 11 of them that are, on the active roster. And they don't seem to be, out of their element at all. I mean, they've already played some big games. Some of them played big games in college, so they've got the experience there. But the experience of when Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones are there to tell you what it's going to be like, and that helps. And then when you've got guys like Carlos Dunlap, who've been in the league for a long time, haven't gotten a Super Bowl, are there to tell you how, you can't cherish this opportunity. All those messages really seem to be ringing true. And this team looks like they're having fun, they're confident, they're relaxed.
I had to laugh, Matt, when Brian said good times, bad times, because there have been very few bad times for the Chiefs.
The Super Bowl loss to the Bucs.
Oh, a Super Bowl loss. Well, try being in the same division as these guys.
Well, you can't have everything.
They've owned the Broncos for the last 7 years or thereabouts, and I suppose I'm just curious. Like, ever since Andy Reid arrived at Arrowhead, things have been pretty good, and obviously this year you're back in the Super Bowl. Like, the Tyreek Hill trade, he moved on. A lot of people, a lot of questions at that point. What was the thinking, for Andy and for Veach in terms of moving on from Hill, and did they expect, just because they had Patrick Mahomes, it's Super Bowl kind of every year, no matter who's on the rest of the roster?
Well, that is certainly the mentality. When you have Patrick Mahomes, it's Super Bowl or bust every single year. It doesn't really matter who the other players on the roster are. That's your goal. That's the expectation. But when they made the deal with Tyreek, they absolutely realized that there were going to have to be some changes. They really didn't have the depth that they had, and honestly, that was an issue in the past. The last couple of seasons, I think that depth started to show at the end of the year when it became either Kelsey or Hill. And teams knew that, and it's a great example in Tampa Bay. They did a great job of taking away both those guys. And then it's about who's going to step up. Well, Brett Veach set out to try and make sure that even though he knew he wasn't going to have Tyreek Hill, that they were deeper 2 through 5, that they had more of a supporting cast. And Patrick was going to have to be able to take advantage of that. And that's something that, once again, last year, the AFC Championship game, not sure they were able to find that way. So between Patrick learning that he has to rely more on the supporting group and trust the guys around him, and Veach bringing in the right guys. And, and I go back to in April, Andy Reid made the decision to say, we're going to do everything virtually. We don't have to. We could bring everybody in for OTAs in that second phase and do it virtually. But tell you what, we're going to do it virtually. You guys go off on your own. And what does Patrick do? Patrick goes down to Texas and gets all these new guys, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster. When the rookies get drafted, they come in. Justin Watson's down there. They're throwing in Texas all through April until the OTA start in May, with the third phase. And they were already on the same page. They had that chemistry. So by bringing in the right guys and bringing in some depth, they really were figured out how to address the issues without having a Tyreek Hill.
Do you think it was a case of Tyreek Hill is such a great player, and we saw for large parts of the season before the Dolphins struggled as a quarterback, he's such a fantastic player, and Tennessee could have been an offensive player in the year if things hadn't gone wrong for the top. There was a sense that we need a more collaborative approach around this team. Like Juju Schuster comes in, Valdez-Scantling. Not massive marquee players, pretty strong players in their own right in terms of their NFL career. We saw what Schuster did in Pittsburgh, and he stayed there for another year. And Scantling obviously played with Rodgers. So experienced players that could come in and kind of quickly get up to speed around what the expectations are of the Chiefs and what's expected going into the season.
Yeah, and that's a great point because, on the one hand, the Chiefs went out with the right philosophy, which is that you're not going to replace Tyreek Hill with one person. You got to replace him with multiple people. And Juju was a really key piece because this was a guy that, they coveted last year. They wanted to get back. He really wanted to say, spend that last year in Pittsburgh with Ben. And that was understandable. When he was back on the market this year, the Chiefs were able to get him. And there's no doubt. This guy absolutely fits in this offense. It was exactly what this team needed. They went in with the right approach of saying, you can't replace him with one guy. But what you can do is you get complementary pieces that can be part of a bigger whole.
And look, I suppose one of the key battles tomorrow is going to be the Chiefs O-line against that Eagles D-line. The last time the Chiefs, obviously against Tampa Bay, that was the piece that, because of injuries, it fell apart. We've seen the Chiefs went out straight away and addressed that. But what, from a Chiefs perspective, what does that battle look like? Are they going to be able to hold up against? Because it's not just 4; it's 8 guys because they can bring in the reserves. So you're Creed Humphrey, and you're thinking maybe I'm getting a rest here, and all of a sudden Sue walks to the line, and you got to face against him.
Yeah, there are no breathers. I mean, especially, those 2 starters, when Hargrave and Cox got 18 sacks between them on the interior. And that's why, to me, I mean, I do think that the interior is key here, because in a lot of games for the Eagles, they're getting great matchups on the inside. Well, I think this interior for the Chiefs is probably tremendously underrated. I mean, they should probably have 3 Pro Bowlers right there. Joe Tooney's one. Creed Humphrey's a Pro Bowler. Trey Smith should be a Pro Bowler. He's going to be a Pro Bowler pretty soon. So that is the teeth of the Chiefs' offensive line. What those guys are going to have to be able to do is, you're right. I mean, they've got to be able to take on, Cox and Hargrave and win one-on-one matchups, because one of those guys is going to be needed to help on the outside. With Orlando Brown on the outside and Andrew Wiley on the right, they've both have had, I think, improving seasons. They played their best football collectively as a group, that offensive line, I think, the last month or so. But there's no doubt. I mean, with the reinforcement that you're going to get from the Eagles, you're going to have to provide more help on the outside. That's probably going to mean a lot of multiple tight end formations. Jerick McKinnon's probably going to be a bigger part of the game plan because he's such a good pass blocker. And obviously the Chiefs are going to game plan around that. They're going to, put a lot of guys in motion. You take advantage of, that to try and not only just see what the defense is in, but to slow those guys down. Because, when you got Kadarius Toney going around the backfield, and he can take that on a reverse, the pop passes and the orbit motions they use on the outside, those slow down defense. So the Chiefs have to not only win their matchups on the inside, but they've got to take advantage of some of Andy Reid's tricks to slow down the guys on the outside.
I'm wondering how balanced they'll try to keep the offense tomorrow, because this week Hilaire has been taken off the IR, and it looks like he's going to be contributing tomorrow. You touched on McKinnon there, who's had a really strong season. And then you've got the rookie running back. You touched on the 11 players off in terms of rookie class contributing. He's had a really good, strong second half of the season. I mean, we all expect Mahomes to come out short, but is there an off-kilter situation where they say, let's try get the run game going and be effective with that, and then it allows us to kind of look for pass plays for Patrick?
Yeah, it's a great question, because this has been a running back by committee approach this entire season, so it hasn't been down to just one guy. And so even though Pacheco late in the year was getting the bulk of the work, I mean, McKinnon was getting enough touches. Clyde, we'll see how they use him. Before he got hurt, he was really more of a situational player, and he could still be, but depth for the Super Bowls, that's exactly what you need. He does bring that. I wonder about the balance, because Andy Reid's typically a 60-40 kind of guy, pass run. But the last time that they played the Eagles, they put a pretty strong emphasis on running the football. And that's something that, Andy Reid really likes to put people off kilter. That's his strategy. I mean, he wants to make, defensive coordinators uncomfortable. So he's going to do something out of expectations. Does that mean, hey, maybe he does come in here with a desire to run the football a little bit more? Maybe, but make no mistake, this game plan runs through Patrick Mahomes.
And just on that, in terms of one of the key strengths the Chiefs have had is in Andy Reid and that scripted stuff, right? And he's so good at that, and he's so good at testing you and finding out what you are going to do on defense, get you the looks, wants to test everything out, and then takes advantage of that over the course of the next kind of maybe 3 quarters of the game or thereabouts. Like, what do you think we might see? We saw, obviously, the kind of rugby-esque move early on with the pass to Travis Kelce that he kind of lateraled out and it was too low. I thought that was interesting. I mean, we've seen maybe rugby moves all season in some ways in terms of those rolling mauls. But in terms of like going up against this Eagles defense, what is Andy going to be looking to really test and see what they're doing early on?
Yeah, that's always intriguing. And I mean, the thing is that a lot of the stuff that this group comes up with, a lot of it comes from Andy, but everybody has a piece of it. So they're consistently, in a typical Chiefs practice, there's those dead segments where the defense is working and the offense is supposed to have some time to take a breather, get some rest. And what do the skill guys do? They go over and they try and come up with some, stuff that, there's things on the fun. But Mahomes is trying to come up with some new passes that nobody has seen yet before. And eventually those things work themselves into the game plan. So, yeah, you're going to see that. I mean, remember against the 49ers, they ran the Rose Bowl parade. Play. Andy's going to have some of those things, absolutely. But it's hard to predict, because I couldn't have told you that they were. I couldn't have told you that they were going to run the Arctic Circle, where they ring around the posy. Couldn't see that coming, but they're going to have some of those. And you're absolutely right. The script is where Andy Reid's strength, and it has really been a strength this year. I thought watching the opening script against the Bengals, if Patrick Mahomes doesn't sprain his ankle, I mean I think they put up 40 on him in that game against Jacksonville. I mean particularly they were strong hot in that game. That they were on a roll. So I'm really intrigued. I mean if the Chiefs don't get off to a hot start, that's where I think they could run into some problems.
Steve Spagnuolo, I'd argue his greatest achievement as a coach, defensive coordinator, was in this stadium in the 2008 Super Bowl 42, when the Giants beat the unbeaten Patriots. I had to get that in, Colum. But he's going to win this game tomorrow, and he's, like you touched on, the offense and the collaborative approach in terms of the change of dynamic this season. It's similar with the defense. I mean, I wouldn't say you've got 3 cornerbacks, all rookie class. You've got a safety, rookie class. Chris Jones has had another strong season. It was evident in the playoff game against the Bengals, where the offensive line, the Bengals really struggled to kind of keep hold of them. You've got the Greek God coming in with sacks as well. I mean, the defense has really stepped up over the course of the second half of the season as well.
It really has, and and I think it took a while. It's similar to 2019, when it took about half a season before Spagnuolo really figured out what he had. It was his first year as coordinator, and really was figure out the rotation and the mix that worked. Once they figured that out, things really clicked. This year it seemed to take longer, and and part of that I think is absolutely the rookie class. I mean, you got a lot of young guys you're trying to work in there and figuring out which one's the best, which ones fit the best spots. That takes some time. They had a couple of suspensions too with guys, so I think it took a little bit longer. I don't think it was really until maybe about week 12, week 13 that you really started to see this defense round into shape. And but I think that's also the advantage too, is that to a degree, because right now Spagnuolo, some of the things he's doing defensively, there's not a lot of it on tape. I mean, it's a little bit different what they were doing earlier in the season. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been playing better of late. They've been a little bit more unpredictable. And also these guys now know the system well enough that Spagnuolo is more able to do the things he likes to do, which is some of the exotic blitzes and really throw different looks and unscripted looks at some offenses.
Everyone, we talk about Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Chris Jones, and the others. What about the man with the most rings in the building tomorrow, Brendan Daly? He changed position, 4 rings. I mean,
exactly,
he's incredible.
He's a ring magnet.
Yeah, exactly. But he changed. He moved away from a change as a position coach this year. That seems to be something he maybe decided himself. He wanted a bit of a change. Went to Andy. They talked about it. Talked to Steve, and that changed. Can you give us maybe some insights from your perspective about like how it came about and like how it has played out?
Yeah, it was a very fortuitous chain of events, because you're right. Brendan Daly wants to move up. He'd love to be a defensive coordinator. He's been a defensive line coach for a long time, hadn't gotten the opportunity yet. Branching out is a good way to improve your resume. So yeah, he went to Andy and said, I'd really be interested in, coaching linebackers. Spagnuolo starts looking around and, finds, hey, Joe Colum is interested in coming. And so now you're able to get a veteran defensive line coach like Colin, and able to get a Brendan Daly, who is really a tenacious defensive coach, and get him to be working with those young linebackers. And that Daly's experience, I think, in working with Nick Bolton and Willie Gay has been a big part of both their developments this year.
Andy Reid tomorrow potentially winning his second Super Bowl. If it doesn't go that way, the right way, he's been in 4 Super Bowls and only won 1. And we spoke briefly in Radio Row yesterday, 2 elements. One, the Patrick Mahomes factor, that he's the MVP, and you could have touched on potentially trying to give him even more motivation to win the game. Colum touched on earlier around Sirianni's team talk, and the fact that people have been criticising the Eagles, and you play that up in the locker room. But Patrick Mahomes, the MVP, and we touched on the last time an MVP won a Super Bowl. Any more motivation for that in that particular? Would Andy Reid drive that? And Andy Reid, if he was to win tomorrow, dynasty wars get thrown out loosely in the NFL at times if teams look like they're going to go in the right direction in terms of winning Super Bowls. But 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, if they win tomorrow, are we on the cusp of a potential dynasty with the Chiefs?
Well, and then you throw in that, there are 2 overtime losses from 5 straight Super Bowls. I mean, that's just how razor thin it is. And you're right. I mean, that's how razor thin it is for legacies too. Hey, Andy Reid will tell you, and he's been telling his team all week, it is not easy to get here. It's not easy to do this. And that's been something that has dogged him over the years. And there's other great coaches. Kansas City had another one, Marty Schottenheimer, was a tremendous coach. Sometimes it's just not your time. Sometimes it's bad luck. Andy may very well have already had a second ring. He had his entire offensive line not broken down in that game for Tampa Bay. Not having both your starting tackles doesn't give you much of a chance. So Um, yeah, this is a big game. There's no doubt because I think it's a big game not only for Andy Reid and his legacy. It's a big game for Patrick Mahomes. Never tell Patrick Mahomes he can't do something. The fact that the last 9 guys who have tried to win a Super Bowl and an MVP in the last season, a quarterback, have not done it. That only makes Patrick Mahomes want to go out and do it. So I think that's great motivation for him. I have no doubt that he didn't need it already, but throw that on top of the pile. But I also think about the other guys too, because Kansas City won a Super Bowl in the very beginning, back in the 60s. They went to 2 of the first 4 Super Bowls. And I think there's 8 guys from those teams in the Hall of Fame. You win this game, but it's not just Mahomes and Kelsey going to the Hall of Fame. Chris Jones is a candidate now. Maybe some of these young guys, they get some rings. And Creed Humphrey, these guys are Hall of Famers. There's going to be 8 or 9 guys from this team in gold jackets if they win, I think, this game.
When we talk about Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they're so magnanimous all the time at the podium, right? They're not guys who take shots at the opposition. They're always very complimentary. But this week, and Brian has alluded to it, you've seen the 49ers queue up to take shots. You have seen the Cowboys queue up. You've seen the Giants queue up. I mean, and some of it, like Nick Sirianni, is not really a head coach. Jalen Hurts is not really a QB. If you're Andy Reid, who'd never engaged in that sort of stuff, I mean, are you watching this just thinking, would you guys just shut up? You don't need to get, you're talking about Patrick Mahomes rightly and telling him that he can't do something, gives him extra motivation. Telling the city of Philadelphia they can't do something, that's an entire city up in arms.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think Andy, every time he sees those clips, is probably rolling his eyes and it's just like, no, don't give these guys any motivation whatsoever. And he certainly knows the mentality of the Philly fans and what drives them and everything. So I think you're right. I think he would prefer that. And that's certainly the edict that went down from Andy with this team was there is no talking this week. The Chiefs got in some trouble with that against the Bengals during the regular season. And some of the new guys learned a lesson that week, which that's not the Chiefs' way. You don't do it that way. So I think he would prefer it be a different story this week. And hey, that's probably one of the reasons also why he's still on his team. Be complimentary to these guys. Fill their heads a little bit.
Is there any X factor you see in the game tomorrow? I think of Kadarius Toney. He was such an enigma with the Giants before he was traded during the season, and I think it's a balance. People feel that the Giants got a good deal, and he's obviously played reasonably well throughout the course of the time he's been here before injuries. But again, he seems to be fully fit and ready to go. And on his day, he is a fantastic player. We think of other Super Bowls and we kind of get so hung up with the quarterbacks and certain players on teams, and some players surprise us and has a really strong game, and not necessarily just be the MVP, but you look back and reflect on the Super Bowl and go, God, they were really a player we didn't see coming in that particular game. Who is the X factor outside of Mahomes and Kelsey tomorrow?
Tony is a great pick because he is absolutely some guy that you could see maybe getting 4 touches, but 2 of them are in space and he gets into the end zone a couple of times. That's absolutely. I'd put him up there. I'd put Jerick McKinnon into that category too, since he has been kind of the guy at the end of the season that when the Chiefs have had to go to, I think kind of maybe even poached Travis Kelce's touchdown numbers there at the end of the season because I think some of those would maybe normally go to Kelce. But he's been such a great check down guy, and especially now Mahomes is doing that a little bit more. But he's another guy in space that can make guys miss. So I think those are, you look past Mahomes and Kelce and the big stars, those are 2 guys I certainly would keep an eye on.
And I suppose then in terms of special teams, right? Harrison Butker is a guy who up to this year had been having really solid career, but then he gets injured. Maybe has missed a couple more, but at other times has come up big. We saw obviously the return against the Bengals. So the Chiefs special teams units are really generally pretty top notch. Say that somebody who gets to see it up close in the division all the time, but on the other end of it, how important are special teams going to factor in tomorrow?
Yeah, it's huge. And, you're right. I mean, Harrison Butker hasn't had the season he's accustomed to. Injuring that ankle in week 1 has absolutely been a part of it. He still doesn't feel 100%. He's still wrapping that ankle to keep it straight and firm. It was on this field that he hurt himself. So, you wonder if there's going to be any of that residual in there about that for him. The positives for him going to be indoors. And, in the last few months, the ball has not been carrying in Kansas City in that cold weather. So I think he's probably going to be looking forward to the opportunity to test his leg. And he's always said, hey, indoors, and Dave told the same thing, 70, 75 is certainly his range. I think that would probably be pushing it right now, but there's no doubt. I mean, he can boot it. Tommy Townsend, Pro Bowler. The X factor for the Chiefs have been on special teams that they're young. With all these rookies on a typical, one of their phase teams, you're talking about 5 or 6 rookies out there, and they've shown at times. Once again, the rookies have been growing up. They've been playing better of late. So not giving up big plays, not making mistakes on special teams is going to be big.
Matt, you said you're not going home till Tuesday. So come Monday, after you've finished off all your work in terms of writing up the articles reflecting on the game, will you be enjoying a Monday, or will you be reflecting on a defeat in the Super Bowl? What is the Matt Derrick pick for this game, and how is it going to play out?
Yeah, my prediction would say that I'm going to be busy Monday morning because probably be at the stadium until 2:00 before we get kicked out, and then have to be at 8:30 for the press conference for the MVP and everything. So I think the Chiefs are going to win this game. I've got them winning 31-27. Mahomes would likely be the MVP in a scenario like that, but you never know. I think it's going to be a great game.
Matt, appreciate you coming on. Always great to have you on the show throughout the course of the 3 seasons we've been doing this show, and to have you here today, really appreciate it.
Absolutely, blast. I'll be here anytime.
Jordan Schultz, charismatic character. I met up with him yesterday in Radio Row. He gave us a few minutes. He came on the show last August. He said he'd see us at the Super Bowl. Well, he did. He gave us a couple minutes yesterday. NFL Insider from The Score. Here's our entertaining few minutes with Jordan yesterday. Welcome back into Radio Row, Irish NFL show on tour, and I'm here with Jordan Schultz from The Score NFL Insider. Jordan was on the show last August before this season started.
That's right.
Not sure we got a pick from you at the time.
Just taking it right now. No, I'll do it later. Yeah.
A team pick for the Super Bowl
pick.
last August. At the time,
I probably would have said the Lions. No. I do like Kansas City 27-23. That's my last pick.
And what was the season preview?
Oh, preview. I feel like it might have been Bills Packers or something really bad.
It does sound familiar from when you were on the show.
Something not good. We don't need to talk about that.
But look, we are here in Radio Row. Myself and Colum are commenting. We were discussing yesterday. Haven't been in LA last year at Radio Row. So the enormity of this year compared to last year, like this is a real feeling we're back to normal. The Super Bowl has come back with a bang. I mean, the craziness of that is Radio Row. We were trying to explain it this morning on our podcast to people back home.
How crazy.
It's hard to explain how huge it is.
Well, this is also my first experience covering the Super Bowl. So this feels about right. I'm overwhelmed by it, and I've seen a lot. This is a lot for me to handle. The fake Andy Reid, every news booth, every station. There's got to be 400 or 500 stations here, and it's a lot. But I will say that it does feel good that the Super Bowl feels that good, that big. You know.
Were you surprised by the amount of people that were caught out by the fake Andy Reid today?
Oh no, is that happened?
Oh, there was a few.
You know what I was thinking about doing was trying to go over to FanFest and ask fans about like really bad predictions. I don't know. I was thinking the fans are insane here. Because if you're committed enough to get a fan credential and come here, and one of your team is not playing the Super Bowl, you got a problem. Well, as in a good way. You're really passionate.
We were discussing the amount of Eagles fans that will be in town over the course of the weekend.
Yeah.
It's one of the most passionate fan bases in the league. Chiefs have a great following. Like you can sense as the days of building up the game, the kind of atmosphere and the vibe in the town is fantastic.
It is, and everyone. I feel like the Chiefs, Eagles, you have two amazing fan bases, and the energy is insane. I think by tomorrow, it's going to be like lights out. But I do also think that they were saying to me 2 years ago, or last year even, the COVID, it was super slow, and it felt there wasn't a lot of juice. And this is the first time in the last few years where it's really felt it. But somebody did tell me that has come to 25 years that this is 60% of what it was like 6 years ago or 5 years ago. So now I feel like maybe this isn't even a full-on Super Bowl. No, it is really good. I feel like Irish fans appreciate that because they like Celtic and Rangers, so they know.
Oh, you know your stuff.
I know the Celtic and Rangers.
The Old Firm Derby.
Yeah.
Well, there's a team in green in the final. Maybe that's half the battle. And last year in LA, there were so many Bengals fans, Houday Nation, but the Rams fans were either at home or there isn't many Rams fans out there. But this year, obviously, two teams, two sets of fans in the town. Every hotel is full up, and there's a golf tournament on as well.
Golf tournament's insane. Irish fans may not know how big Waste Management Open is, but it is truly ridiculous. I'm actually not going because it's too much for me. LA fans, yeah, I mean, the Rams fans are not known to be, let's say, the same level as an Eagle fan. But Arizona, I was here 10 years ago when the Seahawks lost to the Pats. And I was a fan then. I was really a Seahawks fan. And I swore I'd never come back for a Super Bowl. And yeah, here I am.
Well, as a Giants fan, I've got great memories of
course.
having
Pats.
beaten the Patriots.
09.
08.
Yeah, 08.
Super Bowl 42.
Right.
Should remember, John.
I know. I'm not good with those numbers. I'm good with stats, but not. Yeah.
Just interesting this week, like the Eagles, not that they need any extra motivation going into this game, but there's been a lot of talk from teams not here. 49ers have made some comments around the fact that they feel this team really shouldn't be here. The Giants players last week obviously called out Sirianni in terms of his behaviour in the divisional round. The Eagles are obviously had such a great season, and they're going into this week, people from the outside, as if they're given they need any extra motivation.
No.
Sure, the head coach just goes in and says, look at all this noise from outdoors.
I think in the Super Bowl you don't need that. You don't need that level. You're already so locked, and I think that Philly. I know they got lucky that Brock Purdy got hurt, but I do that because they have had a ton of injuries. Jalen Hurts' shoulder has been messed up. They've had Lane Johnson. So Philly is an awesome team. I mean, that is a complete team. They're favored. And so I was talking to a scout. He was like, if you beat the Eagles, you got to beat them because they are really physical and they will not beat themselves. And that's fair.
On the Chiefs, just the third Super Bowl in 4 years. Andy Reid has only ever won one in terms of the win a few years ago in the Super Bowl against the 49ers. He's lost one when he was the Eagles head coach. Is the added pressure on the Chiefs? Bear in mind, they've been so successful and so consistent over the past 5 years. They've made the Super Bowls. If they were to lose this, Andy Reid is kind of that situation. Was they've been through a lot of Super Bowls. They've only won one.
Yeah. Well, it was always could he get over the hump. Then he did, and now that he has, if they win another one, 2 in 5 or 6 years, then I think now you're looking at Mahomes and Reid as the new age Belichick and Brady. I mean, that's what people would say. I don't put any added pressure on him. Oh, he's only won one. But I think they have a lot to gain from winning a second one. Then you start to talk dynasty. In the new age, if you win 2 in 5 or 6 years, that's a mini dynasty. It's that we see the parity every year. So, I think I'm going to miss my slot.
Okay.
But we can finish if you. I know your schedule.
Get to the Irish NFL show from Glendale, Arizona, the site of Super Bowl 57 tomorrow. Just over 24 hours away. The buzz over the past few days, the vibe, we spoke about radio, but even the sense of last night going out for dinner, a lot more Eagles fans in town, a lot more Chiefs. You could kind of get the sense as the week's building up. You can see all the fans arriving. It was a great atmosphere in the town last night.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I mean, you get to Friday, a lot of people have to finish out the work week before they get to fly down here for the game. But yeah, it was definitely beginning to build last night. What you see this time of year for the Super Bowl is you'll see like Eagles and Chiefs jerseys from every vintage. So you got some, obviously, plenty of Patrick Mahomes there, plenty of Jalen Hurts. But I saw Eagles shirts from the 90s, from the 80s, the same for the Chiefs.
The NFL experience, you popped along yesterday. I was too busy uploading stuff, but I didn't get an opportunity to go in with you. That last year was a fantastic event. And you touched on Chiefs and Eagles, but it's great as well as that to see so many fans from all the various different teams in town for the game. May not necessarily be going to the game, but certainly we'll be packing the bars to watch the game tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, fair play. The NFL put on quite a show. The experience is really great, and they do a lot even before it opens to the public. So there was a whole host of kind of kids from around the area who came into the experience during the week, and the NFL shop was just massive. It was like Stephen's Green if it was entirely filled with NFL gear.
Stephen's Green. Someone texted me yesterday, asked me what Radio Row is like. I said, it's the equivalent of going to Cheltenham in March, except instead of people spending money, they're talking about NFL. Whilst there is a lot of betting podcasts going on, so many speaking about the game and giving their mixed opinions on the game. Time to get into the NFC East champions, the NFC champions, the Philadelphia Eagles, a team I have so much passion and love for as a New York Giants fan. Look, they've been a standout team all year, and I think towards the end of the season, people were kind of going, there's question marks on this team going into the playoffs because Jalen Hurts was out injured. They lost to the Saints. They lost to the Cowboys in a high-scoring game. And people felt maybe the wheels were coming off, but in reality, when you reflect on those games, essentially, when they needed to get things done in Week 18 against the Giants, albeit the Giants put out a mixed team, kind of play better than what the playoff game kind of played about. They were always the number one seed. They were always the best team throughout the course of the season in the NFC. So it probably doesn't come as a surprise that they had 2 comfortable wins albeit the Brock Purdy injury situation, they make you here to play the game tomorrow.
Yeah, they can't control the Brock Purdy injury situation. I mean, to me, the fact that Hurts went out and they struggled is a testament to Hurts as a QB, right? Because lots of people said, "Oh, Hurts, you can put anyone in a QB. Gardner Minshew's going to come in. He's going to run that. He's actually better at throwing the ball than Jalen Hurts." Well, you saw what happened when Jalen Hurts was out. Jalen Hurts is back in. I think Jalen Hurts' ability and his leadership are huge factors for this team. I think this is a 53-man roster who all contribute. I think Howie, and we talked about that. We've talked about Jeff Lowry and Howie and Sirianni and Hurts. I mean, they are in lockstep. They go out there, they really play as a team. And it's very difficult to find a weakness or true weakness across this entire roster. That is why they are the NFC champions. That's why they have been the best team in the NFC, probably across the league for the entirety of the season. They are fantastic from the QB, the O-line, the receivers, the running backs, the D-line, the safeties. I mean, you got to pick your poison no matter which way you try to defend this team or which way you try to attack the team.
Well, the poison I'm going to pick first is the running backs. Matt Derrick talked about running back by committee, in which the approach in which the Chiefs are taking this season. I'm not sure if it's the same dynamic, because if you look at the numbers over the course of the season, it probably doesn't reflect that. Sanders had in the region of 1,247 going into the playoffs, 12 touchdowns. Gainwell has had really strong games. He had a strong game in the championship game. Boston Scott is a bit of an enigma because he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. He's had 20 touchdowns in his career now, and 11 of those have come against the Giants. He's the Giants killer. But again, 2 playoff games, 2 touchdowns. Gainwell played really well and was effective in the championship game. I mean, they've got players across this running back situation where if it isn't Sanders tomorrow, they can still rely on those 2 guys to get it done as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is like, as you said, Sanders was the bell cow for this team for the regular season, but then they came into the playoffs and they've actually kind of been able to lean on the others, right? And that's because against the Giants, they were able to move the ball freely, and against the 49ers, they were going up where they just decided to run the ball because they could. But what makes them so good is the O-line. I mean, realistically, that's the key to this running game, is the fact that the O-line is so good. And you have in Jason Kelce and in Lane Johnson, you have the 2 kind of key pieces. And obviously Lane Johnson is playing hurt. This is a guy whose groin appears to be in pieces. And you saw Nick Bosa in that championship game very early on decide he was going to try to test him. But he won once. That was it. For the rest of the game, Lane Johnson stood up. And what I suppose when the Eagles line up, you don't know what they are going to do because the line can do whatever it wants. Yeah, they can pass the ball. Yeah, they can run it, or Hurts can take off. But the line is so key, and they are so good about getting their linemen going down the field to act as blockers. So whether that is Jason Kelce, whether that is Jordan Mailata, who's a guy who hadn't even heard of football back in 2018, and here he is in a Super Bowl. But to me, it's the key complementary piece. You're not talking about like a Saquon Barkley who can just take the ball and take off. Obviously, Miles Sanders is incredibly talented, but it's the way in which it all works together. The line gets them going, and then Sanders is able to exploit the gaps that the line opens up.
When you're talking about players taking off, and once he's the quarterback, Jalen Hurts is arguably the top running back essentially because he's such a dual threat. And in the 2 playoff games, he didn't necessarily have to run because the games were comfortable. You touched on there that they were able to hand it off in the second half against the 49ers and essentially try to run the clock down. We saw throughout the earlier start of the season, his numbers were off the charts. I mean, there was one game against the Packers on, I think it was Sunday Night Football, where he ran for something in the region of 170 yards. He ran in 2 touchdowns. I mean, that's running back type of stuff. But yet, towards the second part of the season, as the season evolved, he wasn't running as much as we saw. Do you see a scenario tomorrow where they kind of go back to what was working so well? Like, over the course of the season, everything has worked so well. But early on in the season, it was such a key part of this offense.
Well, I think they'll probably see what the Chiefs defense is going to give them. I think that's the beauty of the Eagles is if the Chiefs are going to play the run really tough, they can throw the ball. If the Chiefs are going to allow time for Hurts to escape the pocket, he can take off. Look, I've been the conductor of the Jalen Hurts hype train. ever since he came into the league. I'm a massive fan of him in terms of his ability, in terms of his leadership. And yeah, if you leave any gaps, he will take off. He will take advantage of those. But that's what I think is so intriguing in this, because you're not looking at it going, oh, they're definitely going to lean into the run, or they're definitely going to lean into the pass. It is the fact that they're able to do so many different things, and that's why they're so difficult to defend. So yeah, teams responded during the year in terms of, okay, we're not going to let Hurts run, and then we're going to focus on that, and then all of a sudden he's throwing the ball, or they're having Sanders run. I mean, I go back to Vic Fangio, right, is probably the archetype, or the grandfather, the Don, the engineer behind what we see in the league right now in terms of defense. The cover two that everyone is playing. The Eagles came in last year. You talked about Sirianni under pressure. The Eagles came in. There were all sorts of questions around Hurts and Sirianni, and Vic Fangio with his defense dared Jalen Hurts to beat him through the air with his arm, and Jalen Hurts went out and he did just that, and the Eagles haven't looked back since. So I don't think the Chiefs can say, okay, as long as we prevent Hurts from breaking out, or as long as we stop the Eagles from running the ball, Hurts can't throw it. He can, and he has, and he will.
So last offseason, when we kind of broke down when the wild card game, which they lost to the Bucs, we kind of got into a bit of back and forth around his arm strength and his accuracy and whether he was a good enough thrower. And I challenged you. You're right. You commended him. You were very high on him. Me and Mark were kind of challenging, whether really he was a long-term answer. And you touched on the fact that teams have schemed to make sure he can't run against them. But when you've got players, and don't get me wrong, he is a fantastic quarterback in terms of his throwing strength and his accuracy this season. Devontae Adams, first-round pick 2022 draft. Other teams wanted him. Eagles traded up with the Cowboys, got the deal done, got him. It was unusual to see a trade within the division on draft night, but they wanted to get a marquee wide receiver. Last offseason, they complement that with another draft night, situation. They make the deal to get AJ Brown, and he's been quite vocal at times during the season that he really wants the ball more than he gets it, which is you touched on a few weeks ago. That's good to see. He wants more. He's hungry. He has the desire to have the ball. He's got some great wide receivers, and we spoke to Matt about the secondary of the Chiefs and rookies, and there's 3 rookies that are going to rotate. And they're in for a tough day tomorrow if they can't hold this offense up.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, that what you need to do with a young QB is you put weapons around them. If you're a good team, that's what you go out and do. The Dolphins did that for Tua. The Bills obviously did that for Josh Allen, and the Eagles have done that for Jalen Hurts. Yeah, I mean, you've got 2 WR1s, right? AJ Brown has come in. He set a franchise record this season, but he's been quiet in the playoffs because they haven't had to throw the ball. Like any true WR1, he's a proper diva. He wants the ball. He's going to throw the toys out of the pram a little bit when he doesn't get them, but he doesn't over egg it. He just kind of, always kind of, on me, I could do it. If I had the ball, I'm happy to win. But if I had the ball, I would have done this. That's what you expect from a WR1. They have 2, and that's what makes them so difficult. The other piece is in Dallas Goedert, they have an unbelievably good tight end who kind of flies under the radar, right? Travis Kelce's got all the attention in terms of the tight end. The Eagles have various different options. They also have all of their backs can act as pass catchers in many ways. So again, there are escape routes, right? Jalen Hurts can kind of just lay it off if nothing is on. But yeah, I think the one of the key battles tomorrow will be those Eagles wide receivers against the rookie secondary of the Chiefs.
I love that you called out Dallas Goedert. He got injured kind of in the middle part of the season, and he went off for 4 to 5 weeks. Had an operation, came back, and was really effective in the playoffs. Fantastic tight end. You're right, he doesn't get the kudos because of all the other players around him, but he's a significant player. Bear in mind how strong Travis Kelce is, but yeah, you look at the numbers which Goddard has had over the course of the season. It's been really good. Just we'll flip it to the defense, and again, where are the flaws on this defense? Because going into the season, we spoke, and again, you picked them to go to the Super Bowl. They brought in James Bradbury for the Giants to kind of secure the secondary because Slay came in as a trade from the Lions, and again, he had some question marks. James Bradbury came in because of a cap hit situation, so I think if the Giants had it, back, they would have done their utmost to keep him. There was never any argument as to why they were picking him up. He was a standout cornerback, great with the Panthers, great with the Giants, cap situation. The way they play together over the course of the season, and it's not just a case of sticking one on one side, it's transferable. They go over to each side, they take on different players. It'll be the same tomorrow. They have really gelled so quickly at a very early stage of the start of the season.
Yeah, like the entire secondary, right? You rightly call out the cornerbacks, and those guys have some of the best numbers in the league. Opposing QBs do not like to throw against them. But you got to, again, how do? You got to pick your poison. But they communicate so well with the safeties as well, right? Those guys drop in, drop out, coverage. They give you incredible looks. They're so difficult. And there was a lot of, I suppose, questions about the Eagles' defense last year. It was very vanilla. They don't do this. You can't say that this year. They've been really difficult to play against. And the fact that their secondary is so good is what gives the extra impetus to their D-line to go after them. So yeah, that will be an interesting battle tomorrow, because they will face the best QB in the league. The best QB they've faced all season. That will be a challenge, but it'll also be a challenge, I think, for Patrick Mahomes and for the Chiefs wide receivers, because the Eagles are so good in coverage.
Fletcher Cox, Hassan Reddick, Brandon Graham, Sweat. The list is endless. 70 sacks over the course of the regular season, 5 sacks in the game against the Giants, which put them into kind of NFL records in terms. I think it was the second or third best over the course of the season, in terms of NFL history. Like you touched on it with Matt, like the Chief offensive line, what's it's been so good, and it's really helped Mahomes in that Bengals game. It's going to be a true test tomorrow because it's such a collaborative approach.
Yeah, I mean, like that, you listed out the names and they're all impressive, but like Hargrave and Sue are the other names who don't even get a mention.
Lindell Joseph.
It's incredible, like the depth. I mean, what a job how he has done. And this was the last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl. It was very similar. Like you build up the D line, and it's just relentless, and it's really difficult because you can swap out D-line guys, but you don't swap out O-line guys, right? You want the O-line guy to be as solid as possible. You don't make changes. You want them to play consistently, but the D-line guys can come in and rotate. And that's where the Eagles are so good at wearing you down, because they have the experience. They have the toughness, the nastiness. They're in your face constantly. They're chirping at you. They're letting you know they're there. Every single play matters. Every single play counts. There is no downtime. There is no break. You heard Matt say it. That's what has made them so good. And you've seen it as games have gone on. Even the 49ers found that. Game goes on. You think you're in it. Oh, we're holding good at halftime. All of a sudden, you get into the third, you get into the fourth quarter, and that's what is going to be so interesting to me, because a lot of the time that's where Patrick Mahomes comes alive, is that fourth quarter, right? The 49ers held him quiet for about 50, probably 3 minutes, and all of a sudden Patrick Mahomes came alive, and the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. But I think this Eagles team, to me, especially on the defensive side, are better than that 49ers team were, and that's what it makes such a key battle tomorrow.
We were reflecting on old legacy Super Bowls, and in particular it was around the Broncos and the beatdown they got in one Super Bowl against Washington. We're going back quite some time when Doug Williams threw, I think it was 5 touchdowns in one quarter. But I was thinking of the 49ers, who I just touched on there, potentially nearly made the Super Bowl, and they played the Chiefs earlier in the season, and they held the Chiefs down for 2.5 quarters, and then in the space of 6 or 7 minutes, the Chiefs went off and scored 4 touchdowns. We look at this offense for the Chiefs, and they're going against the Eagles defense. I'm struggling to find games this season where this Eagles defense has struggled. When they struggled against Washington on the Monday Night Football, it was a shock when they lost their first game of the season. And immediately it was a case of, do we have enough players to make sure we're in a position that come to playoffs if there is injuries? They bring in Sue, they bring in Joseph. It's so stacked. And the rotation tomorrow is going to be significant. I'm not sure the Chiefs can rotate in the same measure. I'm sure they haven't had a test like this season. Like, are we going to see a situation tomorrow where they're going to go, oh, man, that Eagles defense is really good, but this is the first real test they've had this season. How can they handle it? How can they scheme against Mahomes?
I've no doubt that'll be a talking point coming up to tomorrow, and they won't have faced anybody like Patrick Mahomes, because there isn't another Patrick Mahomes in the league right now. Okay, he is head and shoulders above everybody else. But I will keep going back to, I don't believe the Chiefs will have faced anybody with the veracity, the intensity, and the depth that the Eagles are going to bring to the D-line. You have got to go out there. Every single snap is a battle. Every single time you have got to win, because it's not just the pressure isn't just coming from the edges, it's coming from the interior. And they're very clever in terms of what they do. If you watch that championship game against the 49ers, I mean, the O-line and the D-line, like the knowledge that they have is so interchangeable. You talked about Fletcher Cox, you talk about Jason Kelsey, we talked about Lane Johnson, and they're bringing the young guys through. Okay, they've got Jordan Davis, they've got Cam Jurgens, so they've been very smart about bringing through a young crop of players as well. But that to me is not, that's what is intriguing about the Super Bowl, right? And you heard like Matt talk earlier about Andy Reid has been there, how it's so often been a coin flip, because it is the best two teams, and they're going to try to test each other. They're going to look where are the weaknesses, and you poke and prod. Very rarely is it. My Broncos have probably been the most kind of heaviest defeats. It's not often that you see that in the Super Bowl, right? The majority of the time in the Super Bowl, it is a one-score game, and I think that's what we're going to see here tomorrow as well.
Yeah, I always hear this phrase throughout the course of the season, coaching matters, and we've seen it this season with teams having new coaches and how quickly teams can turn around, even with lesser players. Like Sirianni in his first Super Bowl tomorrow, going up against Andy Reid, one of the best. I was thinking back this week, trying to come up with a similar scenario, and I could only think of Sean McVay in his first Super Bowl for the Rams, and they weren't blown out in that game against the Patriots. It was very evident after the game that Belichick had his number. McVay went away, licked his wounds, came back, won the Super Bowl last year. He learned from that difficult game, and obviously he moved up with Jericho. Like, it's going to be such an intriguing battle to see how these scheme against each other tomorrow.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. But I think what maybe they have in Sirianni that McVay didn't have, especially on the offensive side of things, is Sirianni's willingness to hand off play calling duties last year, right? Which I think was a testament to him and was a testament to his leadership, his willingness to recognize I can't do all things. And I think that is really, really important. And I think that's where he's got two great coordinators. McVay had it with Wade Phillips. I mean, the Rams defense was lights out in that, but he had nobody else to lean on. So Nick Sirianni does not have to worry about the play calling tomorrow. The other thing about Sirianni, Mina Kimes touched on, he has been his own man as a head coach since he took over, right? He has been aggressive. He has gone for it, but he has been really, really smart about going for it. It will be an intriguing battle, right? Because 24 years versus 2 years. Sirianni, he's gruff, he's in your face, he's no shortage of opinions on Nick Sirianni. Andy Reid, very different, passionate man, obviously very, very smart, very talented, but you would have to say very different approaches between the two head coaches.
We're going to come back shortly and give our picks for the Super Bowl. I have a feeling I know where Colum's pick is going already, and I actually haven't seen the graphics for the picks, but I have a funny feeling I know where it's going. Steve Levy will be commentating on the game tomorrow as part of the ESPN crew for Australia and New Zealand. So Fox Sports will have the game here and across the world, but there's a demographic in Australia and New Zealand which will be watching the game on Monday morning. I think it was Sydney time, was half 10 in the morning kickoff. We caught up with Steve in Radio Row during the week. Colum had a good fortune of speaking to him about his time doing the NFL, his time doing the NHL, and obviously the fact that he's commentating on the game for Australia and New Zealand. A really good interview coming up now.
Welcome in to the Irish NFL show. We are live and in person from Arizona as we build up to Super Bowl 57. Delighted to be joined by the man who will be anchoring ESPN Sports Center for Super Bowl 57, Steve Levy. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Nice to see you.
Well, I'm delighted that you can take the time to join us. And we always ask our guests, right? Have you any Irish heritage? Have you ever been to Ireland? Is there a desire to come and visit the Little Green Island?
All my best friends are all Irish. In fact, they sort of adopted me. I got to live in Boston for 20 years. And so you know about the Irish heritage in the city of Boston. And so, yeah, I feel like I've been adopted by my Irish family there. I did get to Ireland once. Went with the little family trip. I was much younger. But I'm not a golfer. And all the boys, they always want to go and play golf. It's just not my thing. I'll meet you in the bar or pub afterwards.
There you go.
But just never bitten by the golf bug.
Well, you could probably do 18 bars. They do 18 holes. You could do 18 bars. That might work. Now, one of the things you're going to be doing this weekend is you're going to be calling the game.
Yeah.
I think with Lewis and with Dan Orlovsky for Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
In Ireland, right, we got a big time difference, right?
Yeah.
The game's going to kick off at what we would say half 4:30 Arizona time,
okay.
Which is going to be 11:30 back home in Dublin.
Right.
But for in Australia, in Sydney, it's going to be 10:30 in the morning.
Right.
Like, do you hear from fans? Like, what's that experience like for them to watch the Super Bowl on a Monday morning?
So it definitely impacts how we broadcast the show. Instead of, good evening, we say good morning, like that kind of thing. Not good day. I'm never going there, okay? Not going to be that guy. So it does impact us, and it talks about like what are you eating or drinking. It's more breakfast food than probably not having a hot dog at 10 in the morning, or maybe you are. But so just by that in the beginning, in the open, maybe we'll make a reference to it's Monday morning. Because in our brains, it's so entrenched that it's Super Bowl Sunday, right? Mm-hmm. And now it's Super Bowl Monday for those watching us. But really, after the opening kickoff, it's a big football game, and sort of that's how we treat it.
And I suppose on the international side of things, Steve, like we heard, we're seeing the game growing. Henry Hodgson just walked past us, the GM of NFL UK, one of the guys responsible for helping to grow the game internationally. We heard the commissioner talk about there's probably going to be more games in Germany. Yeah. We know realistically, I think undoubtedly, Madrid is going to get a game at some point. Paris is going to get a game. We want to see Dublin get a game. Yeah. Croke Park. You obviously with the Australia and New Zealand, you're probably aware of how big the game is globally. People seem to have been surprised by the reaction in Germany. Like Germany was so huge, and I know you called one of the London games. Right. Like, what are your thoughts on the NFL's global expansion?
I thought, Colin, you were going in a different direction because you said they're hoping to get a game. I think there are countries and cities hoping to getting a team. Like there was talk this past year when we were in London. That London could probably support 2 NFL teams.
The interest is there.
Right, the interest is there. The stadiums are there as well. So the infrastructure, and really the biggest concern is the logistics, other teams, opponents, traveling. So if you have 2 already there, that could make it, a 2-game road trip, make things much easier. So listen, I think that is the future. The NFL is so big, is already so global. I don't know if it's 10 years away, but it's probably not much more from there being international team, singular, and maybe plural even. The NFL can't be stopped. It's a runaway train, and if there's money to be made, and there is, they're going to find a way to make this work, I think, so, international.
Now, one of the interesting things is obviously you cover hockey as well. Yeah. And playoff hockey in the Stanley Cup, it's a 7-game series. In the NFL, it's win or go home, right? I suppose that's obviously, for us, we're probably a little more used to that, from our sports back home. Yeah. For you covering it, how different it is when you are talking to players or coaches and maybe they're 2 down in the series and they're trying to come back, whereas they're down at halftime. They got 30 minutes to turn this thing around.
A lot more pressure, less forgiving, obviously. But think about it. So you just had a 7-game series. In the NBA and the NHL, it's 4 7-game series. If you're the top seed in the NFL in either conference, you only need to win 2 games to get to the Super Bowl. That's 2 good days if you can get that 1 seed. And you're only playing 3 games in a 5-week span. It's because you have the extra weeks built in there, the Pro Bowl and you get the bye week and all that. So it's a massive difference. I think the NHL and NBA, the way they do it, it's sort of a truer test. When you play more games, that's the truer test. You can have a bad game in the NFL and you're done, and it costs you. So that's where the pressure really ramps up. It's one 60-minute performance, so unforgiving if you make a mistake, and like in every other football game in history, turnovers will be the key. But the NHL, we've seen teams recently even go down 3-0 even. In the past, that never happened before. And now that's a possibility too. So it's obviously a different kind of pressure. You couldn't play 7 NFL games. You couldn't have a series in the NFL because of the physical beating the guys would take and the preparation. It's just impossible. So I kind of like the way the sports are different in that regard. Very entertaining both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that pressure, look, we're going to see Patrick Mahomes take to the field again. The Eagles, it's a different sort of team than they obviously were with the last time, different coach. Yeah. But the talk this week has been about it's the best quarterback going up against the best team. Right. What way do you see it playing out on Sunday?
So I'm not sure it's the best team, by the way. So now, of these 2, I think the Eagles are the better team. But I think San Francisco, if they didn't have to play their 5th quarterback, McCaffrey was the 5th quarterback, I think they could have won that game. I think they have the playmakers and the defense as well. So
again, that was that timing didn't go off. Okay. Anyway, it's time for the picks, Colum. Super Bowl 57 picks time. You're up first.
Look, I'm not going to hide it. I've been on them all year. I think they have the best team, the best roster. For me, I believe the Eagles are going to win. I could absolutely end up with egg on my face because Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are that good, and they're that talented. But I believe, and I have seen all too often, that the best defense tends to beat the best offense. I've been on the receiving end of that more than once. So for me, I'm going to say that Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, and the city of Philadelphia will be celebrating the fact that the Eagles are going to hoist the Lombardi Trophy, and that Donna Kelsey is going to be commiserating with her son Travis after tomorrow night.
Any ideas where I'm going?
I can guess.
I was disappointed when the Chiefs didn't win a few years ago because there goes the car alarm. Someone knows my pick is coming in. Look, Tom Brady's won 7 Super Bowls, and as much as we could have joked with Mark, who's at home watching the show tonight around the dynasty and the Patriots, you can't do nothing but put your hands up. And quarterbacks of the caliber of Mahomes come along, and you really want. Personally, I'd like to see them win Super Bowls because they're deserving of the quality in which they put on the field and the quality in which fans of the NFL get to watch at home. Like the Chiefs are a joy to watch at times offensively. And whilst it's been very different this season, it's been touched on by Matt, the offense has still been explosive when it's needed to be. And I'm leaning on the scenario where I don't think they've been tested to this extent this season defensively for the Eagles. They are going to go up against a different beast tomorrow. And despite all the injury concerns around Mahomes, I think he finds a way to win. I was thinking of that play against the Bengals where essentially he really couldn't run, but he found a way to get it done. Okay, the 15 yards. But that's what Patrick Mahomes done. He puts his team on his shoulders. And I think come the fourth quarter tomorrow in a tight game, I think Patrick Mahomes will find a way to win. I think the Eagles will play really well. I think they'll put up points as well. I think we might be one of the best Super Bowls we've seen in years with the 2 number 1 seeds. And I think it could play out similar to the last one which the Eagles won in terms of its high scoring, came down to the end. But I think the Chiefs come out the right side of it. I'll go 31-26 Chiefs win. Andy Reid gets a second. And this dynasty talk only hypes up even more going into the off-season. Mark Cochran is up next. Marcus, let's see what Mark has to say. Eagles. Mark's going with the Eagles.
Happy to see Mark has joined me on the Eagles hype train. He was very, very skeptical of Jalen Hurts just a few years ago. Glad he has seen the light.
Yeah. Okay. Or he doesn't want the Chiefs to win, one or the other. But look, they are the favourites. Christina's up next. Christina, where do we go? It's a balance, 2-2. Christina picks the Chiefs. So she must be coming out. She just, as a Patriots fan, she's picking the Chiefs. Interesting. That is the 4 picks. And then obviously PointsBet, who've been a great partner for us throughout the course of the season. We did a great show in terms of the championship weekend in their off their head office in Dublin. We met some of the PointsBet guys on Thursday in Radio Road. They were very receptive to meeting us on the ground. It was great to have a chat with them. We really thank them for their support throughout the course of the season. I'm not saying it's their pick, but they've given us that the Eagles are 1.5 point favourites going into this game. If you are betting, PointsBet aren't based in Ireland, but we take their odds at the time of recording when we go live, thanks to PointsBet throughout the course of the season. And there's a number of people we need to thank over the course of the season. We're going to thank the guys here today, CBS. We're going to thank Cassidy Traveller, who supported us throughout the course of the season, PointsBet, who thanked us. We're going to thank Mark, albeit he's not here, and the members of the team. Christina, who's supported and helped us throughout the course of this show and has been a keen contributor to the show throughout the course of time when she's come on board. Declan Gowan, who's helped us out as well in the background. Numerous people.
Yeah, so many people. And the fans, the support we have had. I love the interaction. Love the comments that come in on Twitter, kind of across social media. It's been great getting to know more people over the course of the season, and hopefully the community continues to grow. The NFL is committed to growing globally, and you can see it. Like it's been great to see this week the number of international media here. Good to see Michael and Mark here as well this week. Got to give a shout out to Zach Seegers, a great young Broncos writer we've had on the show, who has been great in terms of providing kind of some background information. Want to give him a shout. And so many people at home who have supported us, our friends and family who've supported us in terms of the time that goes in to producing a a show like this throughout the course of the season. I think we were doing 2, if not 3 live shows a week. Obviously, there's prep time and then editing that goes into that. You need to support the family in order to do that. So big shout out to all of those people as well, and all our guests throughout the year and throughout the past 3 years who have taken their time to come on to talk to us about this game that we all love. And it's been a brilliant year. The culmination of it is tomorrow, but that will not be the culmination of the season as such. We're going to continue. There'll be content throughout the off season. We're going to be covering free agency, the draft, and everything else. The NFL does not stop.
You stole my thunder. I was coming to the family part. I did want to thank the family back home for supporting us throughout the course of the season, and obviously we're just going away to do the show this week, and obviously spend our time in Radio Row tomorrow. 4:30 or local time, mountain time. I nearly called it Pacific last week. 11:30 at home. Numerous events, numerous social gatherings in Dublin, Cork, Galway, throughout the course of the country. We thank everybody who's tuned in today, everybody who will watch the show later on at some stage today, everybody who's engaged, everybody who showed up for the Captain America's live show a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Everybody who supports the show. It's been a fantastic response. Every year it seems to get better in terms of the community, the engagement throughout the course of the week. From week 1 to the off season, Colum touched on free agency. We thank everybody. Enjoy the game tomorrow. We'll be in there tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a great day.
Yeah, and if there is stuff that you want us to cover in the off season, things you'd like to see us do, places you'd like to see us go, get in contact with us. We love interacting with fans, so please do. The show would not happen without the people who watch, engage with us. So we truly appreciate your support as well.
It's early afternoon here. I know it's late in the evening at home. Everybody, thanks again. Enjoy the game tomorrow from the Irish NFL Show. Signing out, Glendale, Arizona.